it's Ashley at Bookish Realm, and I'm back with another video. So today is my final video actually in this setting, like the outside setting, and I've done some like in the backyard and I've done some on this front porch. I am going home at the end of this video, so by the time this goes up I'll be going home the next day. So I'll be back filming in front of my bookshelf, so no more of the nice animal sounds and weather and stuff. Like, it's slightly drizzling now, so you can kind of hear like the residue rain in the background a little bit, which I think is pretty cool. But anyway, I am here for my May wrap up part 2. So as you guys know, I did the first part of my wrap up earlier this month, and I'll make sure I link that in the card symbol above. So I'm here to do the second half. And in the second half, I always start off by doing all of my stats for the month. So let's go ahead and jump into those. Okay, so this month I read a total of 34 books. This is one of those things where it's like, how in the world? But I do admit that some of these are single issue comics, which is why my numbers are always a little inflated. So always take that with a grain of salt, because I read quite a few single issue comics from Marvel as part of my Marvel project. But it was a total for 34 books, and the total number of pages that I read this month was 5,147. Now, as far as genre is concerned, I read 1 nonfiction, 1 picture book, 1 historical fiction, 15 graphic novels, comics, or manga, 10 romance/contemporary, 1 mystery, 1 realistic fiction, 1 paranormal, and 3 that fit into the category of science fiction fantasy. As far as the age groups are concerned, I read 2 children's books, 2 middle grade books, 5 YA books, and 25 adult books. For format, I read 4 physical books, 28 ebooks. This was the month of ebooks, and I'm not surprised with everything. Like, as far as me being like a parent, it's so much easier for me to read on my Kindle and my phone than to have a physical book, because I get a lot of my reading done at night. So I'm finding that ebooks are kind of have been my go-to since this has all happened. That's probably going to change once I go back to work, but for right now, 28 ebooks for the month, and only 2 audiobooks. So my audiobook listening slowed down drastically. I was going walking every day and I was listening to my audiobooks then, but my mom started joining us on the walk, so then I just stopped listening. So, and I spent a lot of time with my parents, so it was just kind of, my audiobook listening kind of fell off this month, but I'm sure it's going to pick up next month, which you guys have already seen in my June TBR by the time that this goes up. All right, as far as the sources are concerned, 5 of the books I read were owned by me, 8 were borrowed from the library, 3 were review copies, 8 were a part of Kindle Unlimited, and 10 were from Marvel Unlimited. As far as my other stats that I keep up with, I did horrible this month. I read no books that are considered LGBTQIA+ that have sufficient representation, not just token characters. 0 were translated. 8 were own voices / diverse books. 1 was over 500 pages, and I had a couple that were like super close to being over 500 pages, or being over 500 pages, but they were like in the 490 range, which was crazy. 2 were rereads, and 8 of the books I read this month were written by Black authors. So the first book that I read after I finished my previous wrap up was Theirs for the Night by Katie Robert. This is another Katie Robert book that I decided to check out because I read Desperate Measures by Katie Robert and really enjoyed it. This is an MMF romance, which is my first time ever journeying into MMF, and I thought that the chemistry between the characters was well done. It was well written. There was a twist at the end, which I won't go into, that really sealed the deal for me, because at first I didn't necessarily see the purpose. It's about a main character named Meg, and she goes out for her birthday. Her friend convinces her to go out for her birthday, and when she gets to the club, she meets these 2 guys, Theo and Galen, and they seem to have a chemistry of their own, but they want to pull her into it. And at first she's kind of hesitant, but with some kind of self-evaluating and from some convincing of a friend, she decides to go home with them. And at first I thought that was just kind of be the end of it, and I was like, you know, I wish there was more plot to it. But probably the last 15 to 20 pages, there is an explanation of a lot of reasons why they don't want to continue a relationship with her outside of that one night, even though both of them are significantly attracted to her, not just physically, but they're genuinely interested in her. And I thought that that was really the icing on the cake, and it made the series really interesting. So this is the first book in the Selenium Dynasty series, and this one was a short one, but I think the next ones in the series are full length. I did end up giving this one 3 out of 5 stars, and I'm interested in seeing what happens next. The next thing that I ended up reading was Spider-Man issue number 2. This is part of my read for the 1963 year of Marvel. I don't really have much to say about this. I do think that it was great because it was split into 2 different stories where Spider-Man is actually combating 2 different villains in one issue. It was great to see him as a character. I like the dynamic of him having several different personalities. Like, there's the Peter Parker that deals with himself mentally, then there's the Peter Parker that has conversations with everybody else, and then there's Peter Parker as Spider-Man. And you see the split between these 3 different personalities, and it makes for a great comic book series. I can't wait to dive further into the rest of these issues that I'll be reading. I kind of took a step back for this month, for the rest of this month, because I had so many other things that I needed to get read for videos and reviews. So I pulled back on it, but I can't wait to delve into it again in the month of June, and I ended up giving this issue 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I ended up reading was Conversations in Black, and this is edited and put together by Ed Gordon with a series of a whole bunch of different people who discuss power, politics, and leadership in the Black community. I'm not going to talk about this one much because I did do a full-length non-spoiler review, which I'll link in the card symbol above, and I ended up giving this one 5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was the first book in the Nancy Drew series by Carolyn Keene, and it's The Secret of the Old Clock. This is definitely an interesting journey into rereading this book series because Nancy Drew is definitely a classic. It's a household name. Most people know who Nancy Drew is. Most people have read a Nancy Drew book, even if it isn't in this original series. They have read some form of a Nancy Drew book, and this is actually the beginning, like the very beginning. This title was originally published in the 1930s, but it was republished again in the 1950s to remove some insensitive material that was in it when it was first published, and to make Nancy a more likable character. She wasn't as sweet and easygoing in the original series. She's a little bit more defiant, a little bit more rough around the edges, and I think that this book is it's a book of its time. There are aspects of it that I didn't enjoy, that it was just so convenient when she went to go solve the mystery. And this mystery is about a man who passes away, and he leaves this will, and this will apparently left all the money to his family, who doesn't even like him. But then she starts finding out that there are other maybe like friends and extended relatives that he promised money to, but when they did the reading of the will, none of these individuals got money. So then there becomes this interest in the fact that there may be a second will around somewhere. So Nancy sets out to find the second will. There was just too many ways that it was just convenient for her to figure things out. There was a lot of, I'm just gonna go to somebody's house as a random individual, never met them a day in my life, and they're gonna open their doors and welcome me with open arms, which is not realistic. There were times when Nancy was battling with grown men in a situation by herself, which didn't make sense. She just got out of really tricky and really bad situations too easily, and it just wasn't real for me. But I did take in consideration the time and day in which it was written, so I did end up giving this one a 3 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read this month was a reread of a book that I loved the first time I read it, ended up loving it the second time I read it, and it's Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. And I have a full vlog on this. I did a detailed 40-something minute vlog about this and Children of Virgin Vengeance, which I will bring up later. I did think that this one was well written. It was a great first book to the series, and I did end up giving it 4.5 stars. The next book I read, I listened to on audio, and it is Lovely War by Julie Berry. This is a YA historical fiction novel that takes place during World War I, and it is a interesting perspective of World War I. So this book starts off with Aphrodite being caught in a relationship with Ares, and her husband Hephaestus, I always say his name wrong, but I think it's Hephaestus, catches her in the middle of this romance. And so to explain why she's in this extramarital romance with Aries, she tells the story of these 4 individuals: Aubrey, Colette, Hazel, and James. And I don't want to really give you guys more than that because I went into this kind of blind, not really understanding the premise, and it all made sense when I got to the end of the novel. So I try to not, whenever I talk about this, I try not to say too much. But what I do like about this novel is that it looks at World War I from a different perspective, in terms of not just the war, but the relationship between these 4 characters, as well as how people of color, specifically Black people, and how women were treated during World War I, and that plays a huge role in this. I will say that there is a huge trigger warning for death, violence in this book, of course, because it is a war novel, but I definitely would recommend checking it out. You do see a lot of appearances from the gods and goddesses and how they all tie into this book. I do also recommend listening to this on audio because there are, I think, maybe 2, 4, 6, 7 narrators for this book, and then there's also original music that was specifically composed just for this book that's part of the audiobook, so it made it such a more brilliant experience listening to it on audio. After that, I read a short romance book. This is the 7th book in the Way to a Man's Heart, and it's One in a Melon. And these for me are kind of palate cleansers. They're not really that great. Some of them are really good, but some of them are just not good at all. And this is one of those that I just didn't really enjoy, and it was more so about the writing and the character dynamic. I did like that these 2 characters, Georgina and Grady, actually knew each other and really had feelings for each other prior to this book taking place. But it was just a really weird thing where Georgina called Grady over to help her with a problem, and instead of helping her with her problem that evening, he kind of gives his undevoted love, or declares his undevoted love for her. And it was just weird because it was like he kind of took advantage of the situation, which I didn't like. And then the writing was really messy in certain scenes, that it ruined scenes for me, especially like the more heated scenes. It just wasn't good. Of course, I will continue to use this series as a palate cleanser because, like I said, some of them I have really enjoyed and others I just haven't. But I only ended up giving this one 2 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was Children of Virtue and Vengeance, and I did not like this one at all, y'all. This just wasn't it for me. I think Children of Blood and Bone was such a great start to a series, and I think that Toni made some huge errors in writing this one. I don't know what happened or where her headspace was, but it just wasn't good at all. So I only gave this one 2 out of 5 stars. If you want, like I said, to know more, I linked that video in the card symbol when I was talking about Children of Blood and Bone. Whole explanation of my views on this one. I was really disappointed by this one. The next 2 books I read are part of a cruise ship series called the Luminous Cruise Chronicles, and it's about 7 or 8 Black indie contemporary romance writers got together to write this while the pandemic was going on, just to give people something to read and make light of, you know, a situation that we were in. Not make light as in make fun of, but it was a great way for them to kind of come together and do something good for people to read so that they didn't have to focus so much on COVID. And I am really enjoying it. They're really quick reads. They're more like novellas. They're only 36, in between 36 to 40 pages a piece. And each one, like I said, is written by a different Black romance contemporary writer, which is so cool. So the first one is Love on the Luminous, and this was written by Chinsia Higgins. And this one is about a girl named Morgan who had just gotten a divorce from her husband, and I think her sister drags her on this cruise just for her to get out. And it's a singles type of cruise so people can mix and mingle. And she meets this guy and she takes the first step, and then she gets kind of shy. But I love that she takes the first step. That's what I loved about it, that she takes the first step. So it was just so good to read. I loved the writing. There were a couple grammatical errors, but other than that, like, it was just a great experience reading it. And I'm pretty sure that the male lead was Latinx, and I don't think I've ever read a romance where the relationship between two characters is a black woman and a Latinx man. So that's really cool. And I ended up giving that one 4 out of 5 stars. I then read the second one, which was Love on Deck by Ashley Nicole. And this one was really good because it was Reagan who actually goes on the ship to kind of just relax because her and her boyfriend had broken up, and she was just trying to detox from it. She's supposed to go with her cousin, but her cousin kind of didn't follow through on what she was supposed to follow through on. So it was kind of an interesting situation. And what ended up happening from there was that she meets her ex on the ship. So it's kind of a rekindling of a romance type of situation, and it was so good. I also gave this one 4 out of 5 stars, and I really cannot wait to delve into the rest of this series, y'all. It is such a good series. The next book I read was Rugged by Shae Violet. This is the second book that I've read by Shae Violet. She's another black contemporary romance writer that writes mainly interracial romances that feature black women and white men. And this one was specifically about Janelle and Olin. Janelle would basically starts off telling us a little bit about her great-grandmother, and then how she ends up going to college and her great-grandmother passes, but they have this cabin that they were going to liquidate for assets, like sell it for assets. The cabin was an asset that they were gonna liquidate for cash, and Janelle was basically like, no, don't do that. I want to spend some time at the cabin in the wilderness. This takes place in Nevada. She said she wanted to do this because she writes poetry, and it would give her a great opportunity to kind of spend the summer there after she finishes her year of teaching. And she goes there and she meets Olin, and it is such a cute wilderness type romance. I've never read a romance either where it's like in the wilderness and it's rugged. Like, Rugged is a really good title for this book, but it was so good. It made me feel so peaceful and calm because it took place in an open area where there weren't a lot of people, so there weren't a lot of characters, and it was really just focusing on the two of them as characters, and it was just phenomenal. And I ended up giving this one a 4 out of 5 stars. I'm so excited to pick up more by Shae Violet. If you've never heard of her, definitely check out her stuff. All right, y'all, so that is it. I hope you guys have enjoyed. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more content from me, make sure you hit the subscribe button, hit the bell for notifications. Remember, I upload videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And if you guys want to tell me more about what you read in May, let me know in the comment box below, and I'll be back with another video soon.